Blood dripped from Ezra Stone's forearm onto the snow, each drop spreading like a dark flower blooming in winter. He stood on the porch of his cabin, rifle still warm in his hands, breath coming out in white clouds that the wind tore apart as quickly as they formed. 3 bodies lay in the snow before him. 3 men who had come to take something that did not belong to them. 3 men who would never take anything again. Behind him, through the frost-covered window, he could see her silhouette. She stood in the doorway of the cabin, a pistol gripped in both hands, her face spattered with blood that was not her own. She was trembling, but she had not fallen. She had not run. She had stood her ground and pulled the trigger when it mattered. 3 weeks ago she had been a stranger, a half-frozen woman who collapsed at his door during the worst blizzard in a decade. He had not wanted to save her. He had not wanted anyone in his life, had not spoken more than 100 words to another human being in 8 years. But he had opened the door anyway, and now everything had changed. She stepped out onto the porch, her boots leaving small prints in the thin layer of fresh snow. The pistol was still in her hands, but she had lowered it. Her eyes, green as spring leaves, scanned the darkness beyond the reach of the cabin's light. "He will send more men," she said. Her voice shook, but her gaze did not waver. "I know," Ezra replied. "And next time Blackwood will come himself." She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell the gunpowder on her skin, the fear in her sweat, and underneath it all, something like hope. She looked out at the Rocky Mountains, swallowing the night at the vast wilderness that had been his prison and his sanctuary for nearly a decade. "What do we do?" she asked. Ezra looked at her. This woman who had been a stranger 3 weeks ago. This woman who had changed everything. We end this, once and for all. This is how it all began. 3 weeks earlier. The stagecoach groaned and swayed as it climbed higher into the Rocky Mountains, its wooden wheels creaking in protest against the rutted road. Inside the cramped cabin, Lily Bennett sat alone, her thin wool shawl pulled tight against the November cold that seeped through every crack and gap in the aging vehicle. She was 24 years old, with chestnut-brown hair that had come loose from its pins and now fell in tired waves around her face. Her eyes were the color of new leaves in spring, though they held none of spring's warmth. They were the eyes of a woman who had seen too much hardship, who had made too many compromises, who was running toward an uncertain future because the past had become unbearable. In her lap, clutched in fingers that had gone white from the cold, was a letter. She had read it so many times that the paper had grown soft at the folds, the ink beginning to fade, where her thumbs had worn away at the words. It was from a man named Harold Pritchard, a widowed rancher in Silver Ridge, Colorado. A man she had never met. A man who had agreed to make her his wife. The letter was simple and businesslike. Mr. Pritchard had described himself as a man of 58 years, owner of a modest cattle operation, seeking a young woman of good character to manage his household and provide companionship in his remaining years. He had promised respectability, a roof over her head, and a fresh start in a land far from the troubles of the East. He had not promised love. Lily had not expected it. Love was a luxury that women in her position could not afford. She thought about the chain of events that had led her to this swaying stagecoach climbing ever higher into mountains she had never seen before. 3 years ago, her father's textile mill in Boston had burned to the ground, taking with it everything the Bennett family had built over 2 generations. Her father had survived the fire itself, but the shock and the shame had stopped his heart within a month. He had died in his sleep, leaving Lily and her mother with nothing but debts and creditors circling like vultures. Among those creditors was Theodore Blackwood. Even thinking his name made Lily's stomach clench with a fear that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Blackwood was a moneylender, though that word seemed too clean for what he truly was. He was a predator in a tailored suit, a man who built his fortune on the desperation of others, who charged interest rates that could drain a family dry within months, who had connections to men who could make problems disappear. Her mother had borrowed from Blackwood to pay off the other debts. A temporary measure, she had called it. A bridge until they could get back on their feet. But the interest had compounded, and the payments had become impossible, and soon Blackwood had begun to visit their small apartment personally. That was when Lily had understood what he truly wanted. It was not the money. A man like Blackwood had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. What he wanted was her. She could still remember the first time she had caught him looking at her. She had been serving tea to him and her mother, her hands steady despite the fear churning in her gut. His eyes had traveled over her body slowly, methodically, the way a man might examine a horse he intended to purchase. When their eyes had met, he had smiled a smile that made her skin crawl, a smile that promised things she could not bear to imagine. He had begun to visit more frequently after that, always with excuses, always with papers for her mother to sign, with new terms to discuss, with matters that required his personal attention. And always his eyes would find, Lily would follow her around the room, would linger on her in ways that made her want to scrub her skin raw. Then came the proposal. Not to Lily directly, but to her mother. Blackwood had a business associate, a man named Sterling, who was looking for a young wife. Lily would be perfect. The marriage would erase all debts, would provide security, for the Bennetts would solve all their problems at once. Sterling was 63 years old. Lily had seen him once, a fat man with wet lips and hands that wandered too freely. The thought of being his wife made her physically ill. She had refused. She had made a scene at the dinner party where the engagement was to be announced, had shouted words that proper young ladies were never supposed to know, had made it absolutely clear that she would rather die than marry that man. Blackwood had not been pleased. The next morning he had come to their apartment alone. Her mother had been out trying to find work as a seamstress. Lily had been alone when she opened the door to find him standing there, his smile gone, his eyes cold and flat like a snake's. "If you will not marry Sterling," he had said, "then we will find another way for you to repay what your family owes." He had not touched her. He had not needed to. The threat in his voice, the promise in his eyes had been enough. She had understood with perfect clarity what her future held if she stayed in Boston. That night she had stolen the last of her mother's hidden money from beneath the floorboards. She had written a letter of apology that still made her chest ache to remember. And she had fled into the darkness, leaving behind the only life she had ever known. The advertisement in the train station had seemed like salvation. A respectable rancher seeking a wife. Colorado, thousands of miles from Boston. A chance to disappear, to become someone new, to escape the reaching hands of Theodore Blackwood. She had written to Harold Pritchard that same night from a boarding house in Philadelphia. She had been honest about her situation, or as honest as she dared to be. She was a woman of 24, educated, capable of managing a household, willing to travel west for a fresh start. She had not mentioned Blackwood. She had not mentioned the debts. Some truths were too heavy to put in a letter. Pritchard had replied within 2 weeks. His letter had been brief but not unkind. He had accepted her proposal. He had sent money for the journey. He had told her to come to Silver Ridge as quickly as possible, as winter was approaching and the mountain roads would soon become impassable. And so here she was, 3 months later, climbing into the Rocky Mountains in a stagecoach that felt like it might shake apart at any moment, going to marry a man she had never seen, hoping that the distance would be enough to keep her safe from the monster she had left behind. The driver, an old man named Walt, with a face like weathered leather and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, had been her only companion for the past 2 days. He had stories about every mile of this road, about the gold rushes and the Indian wars and the hard men who had carved civilization out of this wilderness. Lily had listened gratefully, letting his gravelly voice fill the silence that otherwise would have been filled by her own fears. Now Walt's voice cut through her thoughts, calling back to her through the small window that separated the driver's seat from the cabin. "Storm coming, miss," he said. "Bad one by the looks of it. Sky's got that color, you know, that green tint that means business." Lily leaned toward the window, peering out at the sky. The old man was right. The clouds gathering over the mountain peaks ahead were unlike anything she had seen before. They were dark and heavy, almost purple in places, and there was indeed a greenish tinge to the light that made everything look slightly wrong. "How far to Silver Ridge?" she asked. "Another 5 miles, maybe 6, Walt replied. "Road gets steep from here. If that storm hits before we get there, we might have to find shelter and wait it out." Find shelter where Lily looked at the landscape around them. Dense pine forests covered the slopes on either side of the road, broken only by occasional clearings and rocky outcroppings. It was beautiful in a savage way, but there was nothing that looked like civilization. "There are some homesteads up here," Walt said. "Trappers, hunters, folks who like their privacy. Most of them are decent people, though there is one fellow up on Greystone Mountain who is a bit particular." "Particular?" Lily asked. "Keeps to himself," Walt explained. "Lives alone up there, has for near 8 years now. Comes down to Silver Ridge maybe once a season to trade furs for supplies. Never says more than he has to. Never causes trouble, mind you, but never makes friends either. Folks wonder what happened to him, what sent him up that mountain, but he does not talk about it, and nobody dares to ask." Lily felt a flicker of curiosity despite her exhaustion and fear. She understood something about running from the past, about needing to disappear. "What is his name?" she asked. "Stone, I think. Ezra Stone. But like I said, he is not the social type. Best to steer clear of Greystone Mountain if you can help it." The stagecoach lurched as the road began to climb more steeply, and Lily settled back against the worn seat cushion. She closed her eyes, trying to rest, trying not to think about what awaited her in Silver Ridge. Harold Pritchard, her wedding night, the duties of a wife that she knew about only through whispered hints and embarrassed silences. She had never been touched by a man, never been kissed. Her understanding of what happened between husbands and wives came from the half-heard conversations of other young women and the vague, uncomfortable words her mother had offered before Lily left Boston. "It is a duty," her mother had said. "You must endure it. Try to think of something else." The thought of enduring such things with a stranger, a man more than 3 decades her senior, whom she had never even seen, made her want to weep. But she pushed the feeling down, locked it away in the place where she kept all her fears. She had made her choice. She had chosen an unknown future over a known horror. Whatever Harold Pritchard turned out to be, whatever their wedding night held, it had to be better than becoming Theodore Blackwood's property. It had to be. The first snowflakes began to fall just as the stagecoach crested a ridge, and within minutes the flurry had become a blizzard. The wind came first, a howling fury that seemed to scream down from the peaks like something alive and hungry. It hit the stagecoach broadside, rocking the vehicle so violently that Lily was thrown against the door. She grabbed the edge of the seat, bracing herself as best she could, while outside the world dissolved into white chaos. She had grown up in Boston, had seen nor'easters that paralyzed the city for days, had thought she understood what a snowstorm could be. She had been wrong. This was something else entirely. This was nature in its most primal fury, a force so vast and indifferent that human beings became nothing more than specks of dust in its path. The snow was not falling, it was driving. The wind carried it horizontally, sheets of white that reduced visibility to mere feet. Lily could no longer see the driver's seat, could barely see the window in front of her. The temperature inside the cabin had dropped so sharply that her breath came out in thick clouds, and she could feel the cold seeping through her clothes, through her skin, down into her bones. "Hold on, Miss Walt," shouted his voice, barely audible over the shriek of the wind. "Horses are spooked. I am going to try to keep them steady." Lily heard the panic in the horses' whinnies, felt their terror transmitted through the lurching and swaying of the coach. They were climbing a steep grade now, the road narrow and treacherous under the best conditions. In this storm on roads, she could not see with horses that might bolt at any moment. The danger was overwhelming. She began to pray. It was something she had not done in years, not since her father's death, when she had concluded that if God existed, he was not listening. But the words came back to her now, fragments of childhood prayers tumbling through her mind as the coach swayed and groaned around her. Then everything went wrong at once. There was a lurch, a sickening drop as the front wheel hit something hidden beneath the snow. Maybe a hole, maybe a rock, maybe just a rut that had become a trap. Lily heard Walt shout, heard the horses scream, felt the world tilt at an impossible angle. The coach was going over. She had time to throw her arms up, time to scream, and then she was tumbling, rolling the world a chaos of breaking wood and flying snow. She hit something hard, pain exploding in her shoulder, and then she was falling, rolling down a slope. She could not see the snow catching her, and releasing her, and catching her again, until finally, mercifully, she stopped. Lily lay in a drift of snow, face up, staring at a sky she could not see through the driving white. Every part of her body hurt. Her shoulder throbbed where she had hit it, her ribs ached with each breath, and her left ankle sent sharp spikes of pain up her leg when she tried to move it. But she was alive. She tried to call out, "Walt!" His name came out as barely a whisper stolen away by the wind before it could travel more than a few feet. She tried again louder, but there was no response. Only the endless howl of the storm. Lily forced herself to move. She could not stay here lying in the snow waiting for the cold to claim her. She had to find shelter, had to find Walt, had to find something. Getting to her feet was agony. Her left ankle screamed in protest, and she nearly fell back down when she tried to put weight on it. Not broken, she thought. Sprained. Badly. But she could move if she had to. She had no choice. She looked around trying to orient herself. The stagecoach was somewhere above her. She must have been thrown out and rolled down the slope. She could see nothing but snow, nothing but the shapes of trees looming out of the white like ghosts. She had no idea which way led to the road, which way led to Silver Ridge, which way led to anything resembling safety. "Walt," she called again. "Walt, can you hear me?" Nothing. The cold was incredible. It had been cold inside the stagecoach, but out here exposed to the full fury of the blizzard, it was something beyond cold. It was a living thing, a predator, and she could feel it trying to kill her with every passing second. Her thin wool shawl was soaked through. Already her dress was no protection at all against this kind of weather, and her boots, city boots meant for cobblestone streets, were filling with snow. She had to move. She had to find shelter. But which way? Think, Lily told herself. Think. The road had been climbing when the accident happened. That meant the slope was above her, the slope she had rolled down. And the road meant at least a chance of finding help, of finding Walt, of finding anything. She began to climb. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Each step sent pain shooting through her ankle, and the snow was so deep that she sank to her waist in places. The wind pushed against her as if it wanted to knock her back down, and the cold was sapping her strength with terrifying speed. But she did not stop. She could not stop. She thought of her mother alone in Boston, waiting for news that might never come. She thought of the life she had not yet lived, the children she had not yet had, the future she had fought so hard to reach. She thought of Theodore Blackwood and the triumph he would feel if she died out here, a cautionary tale about foolish women who thought they could escape. She would not give him that satisfaction. The climb seemed to take hours. In reality, it might have been 20 minutes, or it might have been 2. Time had lost all meaning in the white chaos of the storm. She could not feel her fingers anymore, could not feel her toes, could barely feel her face. The cold had seeped so deep into her that even her thoughts were becoming slow and sluggish. And then something strange began to happen. The cold did not feel so cold anymore. In fact, it was starting to feel almost warm. A pleasant numbness was spreading through her body, making the pain fade, making everything fade. She wanted to lie down, just for a moment, just to rest. A voice in the back of her mind screamed a warning. This was wrong. This was how people died in the cold. The warmth was a lie, a trick the body played in its final moments. If she lay down now, she would never get up again. But she was so tired, and the snow looked so soft, so inviting, like a white bed that would hold her gently while she slept. No, Lily did not know where the word came from. Some deep reservoir of will she had not known she possessed. She forced herself to take another step, and another, and another. And then she saw it. A light. Dim and flickering through the curtain of snow, but unmistakably a light. Firelight. From a building. A cabin. She pushed toward it with everything she had left, which was almost nothing. Her legs gave out twice, and twice she forced herself back up. The light grew brighter, closer, and then she could see the outline of a structure. A cabin made of dark logs, nestled against an outcropping of rock smoke rising from a chimney that was already half buried in snow. Lily fell against the door. She tried to knock, but her frozen hands would not obey her commands. She tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Please," she managed, "help me." And then the door opened. She had to look up, and up, and up again. The man standing in the doorway was the largest human being Lily had ever seen. He towered over her, at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the entire frame. He was silhouetted against the firelight behind him, his features hidden in shadow, but she could see the outline of long hair falling past his shoulders, and the mass of a thick beard covering the lower half of his face. He looked like something out of a legend. A giant. A creature of the wilderness made flesh. For a moment they simply stared at each other. The dying woman on the threshold, and the mountain man who had opened his door to find her there. The wind howled around them, driving snow into the cabin, but neither of them moved. Then, without a word, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. Lily weighed perhaps 115 pounds, but he picked her up as if she weighed nothing at all. She felt herself pressed against a chest that seemed as solid as the logs of the cabin itself, felt arms like iron bands holding her securely. He carried her inside and kicked the door shut behind them, cutting off the howl of the wind, sealing out the cold. The warmth of the cabin hit her like a physical force. After the brutal cold of the storm, the heat from the fireplace was almost painful, making her numb skin tingle and burn as the blood began to flow again. She tried to speak, tried to thank him, but her body chose that moment to simply stop working. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was his face finally visible in the firelight. A face with a scar running from temple to jawline. A face with eyes the color of storm clouds. Then there was nothing at all. Lily woke slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. First came awareness of warmth, a deep bone-penetrating warmth that was the complete opposite of the cold that had nearly killed her. Then came awareness of softness of blankets made from some kind of fur piled heavy on top of her. Finally came awareness of pain, a throbbing in her ankle and shoulder that told her she was against all odds still alive. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was made of rough-hewn logs darkened by years of smoke from the fireplace. The bed she lay in was simple but sturdy, built from the same kind of timber as the cabin itself. Through a small window to her left, she could see only white, the snow piled so high against the glass that it blocked out everything else. She turned her head and found him. He was sitting on a wooden chair near the fireplace, a safe distance from the bed. In the light of day, or what passed for daylight through the snow-covered window, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was older than she had initially thought, perhaps in his late 40s. His hair was black, shot through with silver at the temples, falling in tangled waves past his shoulders. His beard was thick and unkempt, covering most of his lower face, but not quite hiding the scar that ran from his left temple down to just above his jawline. It was an old scar, long healed, but still visible beneath the dark hair. His hands were what drew her attention most. They were enormous, like the rest of him, with thick fingers and calloused palms that spoke of years of hard labor. But they moved with surprising delicacy as they worked on something in his lap, something she could not quite see. He must have sensed her watching because he looked up. Their eyes met, and Lily felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were not the cold blue she had expected. They were gray, a deep storm gray, like the sky before rain. And in their depths she saw something that surprised her. Not threat, not menace, but something that looked almost like sadness. A pain so deep and old that it had become a permanent part of him. "You are awake." His voice was rough from disuse, as if speaking was something he did not do often. It was deep, like distant thunder, and there was a quality to it that made her think of mountains and solitude and the vast silence of the wilderness. Lily tried to respond, but her throat was too dry. She coughed, and immediately he was moving, rising from his chair and crossing to a small table where a pitcher sat. He poured water into a cup and brought it to her, moving close enough to hand it to her, but no closer than necessary. "Drink slowly," he said. "You were near frozen when I found you." Lily took the cup with hands that trembled slightly. The water was cold, but not freezing, and it felt like salvation sliding down her throat. "Thank you," she managed after a few sips. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Where am I? My cabin." "On Greystone Mountain, about 12 miles from Silver Ridge." He had returned to his chair, maintaining that careful distance. "You collapsed on my doorstep last night. Storm is still going strong outside." The stagecoach, Lily said, memory rushing back. "The driver. There was an accident. We went off the road." "I know." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Found what was left of the coach this morning when the wind died down enough to see. It went over the ridge about a quarter mile from here. The horses are dead." He paused. There was no sign of the driver. Lily felt her stomach drop. Walt, the kind old man with his stories and his crinkled smile. He was gone, probably buried under the snow somewhere, probably dead because of the storm that had nearly killed her too. "I am sorry," the mountain man said, and there was genuine sympathy in his rough voice. If he survived the crash, the cold would have taken him quickly. It would have been like falling asleep. It was meant to be a comfort, Lily realized, a strange kind of comfort from a strange kind of man. She did not know how to respond. She became aware suddenly that she was not wearing her own clothes. Instead of the traveling dress that had been soaked through with snow and sweat, she was wrapped in a large flannel shirt that hung on her like a tent. Her undergarments were still in place, but everything else was gone. The panic must have shown on her face because he spoke quickly. "Your clothes were wet. You would have died of the cold if I left them on you." His voice was gruff, almost defensive. "I did not look. I kept my eyes closed the whole time. Just did what was necessary." There was something in the way he said it, something almost embarrassed that made Lily believe him. This man who looked like he could kill a bear with his hands was blushing beneath his beard at the thought of having seen her undressed. "I believe you," she said softly. Some of the tension went out of his massive shoulders. "Good," he said. "Your clothes are drying by the fire. Should be wearable by tomorrow." "Thank you," Lily said again. She realized she did not even know his name. "I am Lily. Lily Bennett." "Ezra," he replied after a moment, as if the word was unfamiliar on his tongue. "Stone. Ezra Stone," the name the driver had mentioned. The hermit of Greystone Mountain, the man who had not spoken more than 100 words to another person in 8 years. "Mr. Stone," Lily began. "Ezra," he corrected. "Have not used Mr. in a long time." "Ezra," she repeated. The name felt strange on her lips, ancient and biblical. "Thank you for saving my life. I do not know how I will ever repay you." He shrugged, a movement that seemed to involve his entire massive frame. "Was not going to leave you to die on my doorstep." Lily supposed that was fair enough. She looked around the cabin, taking in details she had missed before. It was small, but well maintained with everything in its place. The fireplace was large and built from carefully fitted stones. There was a wooden table with 2 chairs, a set of shelves holding jars and tools, and things she could not identify, and this bed that took up one corner. Through a doorway, she could see a smaller room that seemed to be used for storage. It was the home of someone who had learned to be self-sufficient, who needed nothing from the outside world. The home of someone who had chosen to be alone. Her eyes fell on a piece of paper lying on the table near her bed. With a shock, she recognized it as the letter from Harold Pritchard. It must have been in her pocket when Ezra had carried her inside. He followed her gaze. "You are a mail-order bride," he said. "Not a question. On your way to marry Harold Pritchard." Lily nodded, feeling a strange mix of shame and defiance. "Yes, he was expecting me in Silver Ridge." Was Ezra repeated, putting an emphasis on the past tense? Lily felt her heart stop. "What do you mean?" Was Ezra's storm-gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw something that looked almost like pity. "Harold Pritchard died 2 weeks ago." Heart gave out. "He is already in the ground behind the church in Silver Ridge." The words did not make sense at first. Lily heard them, understood each one individually, but together they formed a sentence that her mind refused to accept. Dead. Harold Pritchard was dead. The man she had traveled over 2,000 miles to marry. The man who was supposed to give her a new life, a fresh start, an escape from Theodore Blackwood. The man she had placed all her hopes on, despite never having met him. Gone. 2 weeks before she had even arrived. "No," she whispered. "That is not possible. I received a letter from him just a month ago." "Letter was probably sent before it happened," Ezra said. His voice was not unkind, but it was direct in a way that left no room for false hope. "People do not usually know when their heart is about to give out, but I came all this way." Lily felt the words tumbling out of her unstoppable. "I gave up everything. I have nothing left. No money, no family, nowhere to go. I cannot go back to Boston. I cannot." "Why not?" Ezra asked. She almost told him. The whole story nearly spilled out: Theodore Blackwood and his predatory eyes, the threats, the terror, the desperate flight across a continent. But she caught herself. She did not know this man, did not know if she could trust him, did not know what he might do with the information. "It is complicated," she said instead. Ezra studied her for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes seeming to see right through her words to the fear underneath. He did not push. "Complicated or not," he said finally, "you cannot go anywhere right now. Storm will last at least another day, maybe 2, and even after it stops, the snow will be too deep for travel for at least a week." He stood moving to the fireplace to add another log to the flames. "You will stay here until the weather breaks. After that, we can figure out what to do with you." Lily should have felt relief, shelter, safety time to think and plan. Instead, she felt only the crushing weight of despair. 3 months of hope, 3 months of imagining a different future, and now she was back where she had started. Alone, penniless, trapped. And somewhere out there, Theodore Blackwood was still looking for her, still wanting her, still determined to possess her or destroy her. "There has to be something," she said more to herself than to Ezra. "Some way to earn money, some work I could do. I am educated. I can read and write and do accounts. I can sew. I can cook. There must be someone who needs help." "Maybe," Ezra said, but his tone suggested he was not convinced. "Silver Ridge is not a big place, not a lot of work for a woman on her own. Then what am I supposed to do?" The question came out sharper than she intended, edged with fear and frustration. "Crawl back to Boston and beg for mercy from the man who wants to own me." She had not meant to say that. The words slipped out before she could stop them, revealing more than she had wanted to share. Ezra had gone very still. "Who wants to own you?" he asked quietly. Lily looked away, unable to meet those penetrating eyes. "Nobody. I did not mean anything by it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions. Finally, Ezra spoke again. "You can stay here," he said, "through the winter, until spring comes and the passes open up. By then, you will have had time to figure out your next move." Lily turned back to stare at him, certain she had misheard. "Stay here with you. I will not touch you." His voice was firm, almost harsh. "You will sleep in the bed. I will sleep by the fire or up in the loft. You will be safe." "But why?" Lily could not understand. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Why would you let a stranger stay in your home for months?" Ezra did not answer immediately. He stood by the fireplace, his massive frame outlined by the dancing flames, his face half in shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, older. 8 years ago, he said slowly, "I failed to save someone I should have saved. I have been running from that failure ever since, hiding up here on this mountain, pretending that if I stayed away from people, I could not fail them again." His eyes met hers, and she saw the depth of his pain. "But you showed up on my doorstep in the middle of a blizzard, and I could not turn away. I will not make the same mistake twice." There was a story there, a tragedy she could only guess at. But she understood something important. This man, for all his size and his solitude and his fearsome appearance, was not someone to be afraid of. He was someone who had been broken by life, just like her. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "Survive," Ezra said. Survive the winter. That will be payment enough. Outside, the storm continued to rage, piling snow higher and higher against the walls of the cabin. But inside, in the warmth of the fire, something had shifted. A connection had been made fragile and unexpected between two people who had both been running from their pasts. Neither of them knew it yet, but in this small cabin on the side of a mountain in the middle of the worst blizzard in a decade, their lives had just become intertwined in ways that would change everything. Winter had only just begun, and somewhere far to the east in the smoke-filled offices of Boston, Theodore Blackwood was already making plans to find what had been taken from him. He had sent men west before hunters who tracked runaways for a price. He would send them again. He would find Lily Bennett, no matter where she had gone, because Theodore Blackwood did not lose. Not ever. And especially not to a frightened young woman who thought she could escape him. The hunt had already begun. The first week passed in careful silence. Ezra Stone was not a man of words. He had spent 8 years alone on this mountain, with no one to talk to except the wind and the wolves, and he had forgotten how to make conversation. But Lily discovered that his silence was not hostile. It was simply the language of a man who had learned to communicate through action rather than speech. Every morning he rose before dawn, moving with surprising quietness for a man his size. He would stoke the fire, ensuring the cabin stayed warm, then prepare a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush or biscuits made from flour he kept in a sealed barrel. He would set her portion on the small table beside the bed without waking her, and by the time she opened her eyes, he would already be outside checking his traps or gathering wood or doing one of the 100 tasks that kept a man alive in the wilderness. Lily watched him. It was all she could do at first, with her ankle still too swollen to bear weight, and her body still recovering from the cold that had nearly killed her. She watched him move around the cabin, noticed the deliberate way he gave her space, never coming too close, never staying in her line of sight for too long. He was trying not to frighten her, she realized. This giant of a man who could have hurt her in 100 different ways was making himself as small as possible so she would feel safe. It touched her in ways she had not expected. By the third day, she was well enough to hobble around the cabin with the help of a walking stick Ezra had carved for her overnight. She had not asked him to make it. She had simply mentioned that she wished she could move around without having to crawl, and the next morning the stick was leaning against the wall beside her bed. Smooth, sturdy, the perfect height for her. He had stayed up late making it, she knew, because she had heard the soft scraping of his knife against wood long after the fire had burned low. "Thank you," she had said when she saw it. He had only nodded. By the end of the first week, Lily had learned the rhythms of the cabin. She knew that Ezra liked his coffee strong and black brewed in a dented tin pot that looked older than she was. She knew that he preferred to eat in silence, not out of rudeness, but simply because he had forgotten that meals were supposed to be social occasions. She knew that he carved small wooden figures by the fire in the evenings, animals mostly created with a skill and delicacy that seemed impossible for hands so large. She also knew that he had nightmares. The first time it happened, she thought the cabin was under attack. A sound tore through the darkness somewhere between a shout and a sob, and Lily jerked upright in bed, heart pounding, searching for the source of the noise. Ezra was on the floor near the fireplace, tangled in his blankets, thrashing as if fighting an invisible enemy. His face was contorted with an anguish that made Lily's chest ache just to witness, and he was speaking words tumbling out of him in a desperate stream. "Sarah. No. I am sorry. Sarah. James. Please. I am sorry. I am so sorry." The names meant nothing to her, but the pain in his voice meant everything. She almost went to him, almost reached out to shake him awake, to pull him from whatever hell he was reliving. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was the knowledge that a man startled from a nightmare might react violently before he was fully conscious. Perhaps it was simple respect for his privacy. Perhaps it was the understanding that some griefs were too deep to be witnessed by strangers. She lay back down and pretended to be asleep when he finally woke, gasping, staring into the dying embers of the fire with eyes that saw something far away and long ago. Neither of them mentioned it the next morning, but Lily remembered, and she wondered. Sarah, James, who were they? What had happened to them? What had broken this man so thoroughly that he had fled to the top of a mountain and refused to come down for 8 years? The second week brought a shift in their dynamic. Lily's ankle had healed enough that she could walk without the stick, though she still favored it slightly. The enforced idleness of her recovery had begun to chafe at her, and she found herself looking for ways to be useful. She had never been the type of woman who could sit still and do nothing. Even in Boston, even in the darkest days after her father's death, she had always needed to be busy, to be productive, to be doing something with her hands. "Teach me," she said one morning, as Ezra prepared to go out and check his trap lines. He paused his hand on the door latch and looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. "Teach you what?" "Everything." She gestured at the cabin, at the wilderness beyond its walls. "How to survive out here. How to take care of myself. I cannot spend the entire winter sitting by the fire and waiting for you to bring me food." For a long moment, he said nothing. She could see him weighing her words, trying to determine if she was serious or just making conversation. Then slowly he nodded. "Tomorrow," he said, "when the weather clears, I will show you." He was as good as his word. The lessons began simply. Ezra taught her how to melt snow for drinking water, explaining that you should never eat snow directly because it would lower your body temperature and use more energy than it provided. He taught her how to tend the fire, how to bank it at night so it would last until morning, how to read the color of the flames to know if the wood was burning efficiently. He taught her how to prepare and preserve meat, how to smoke it so it would last through the lean months, how to render fat for candles and cooking. Lily learned quickly. She had always been a fast learner, and survival, she discovered, was just another skill to be mastered. Ezra was a patient teacher, demonstrating each task with his hands rather than explaining it with words, letting her watch and then try herself, correcting her mistakes without criticism. "You are good at this," he said one afternoon after she had successfully skinned a rabbit he had brought back from his traps. Most people would have ruined the pelt. "I learn fast when I have to," Lily replied, wiping her hands on a rag. "And out here I have to." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "Yes," he said, "you do." As the days passed, Lily began to notice things about Ezra that she had missed before. The way his hands moved when he carved his wooden figures, so gentle and precise. The way he always made sure she had the warmest spot by the fire, the best pieces of meat, the softest furs for her bed. The way he watched her when he thought she was not looking, his eyes following her around the cabin with an expression she could not quite read. She noticed other things too. The scars on his hands and arms visible when he rolled up his sleeves to work. The way he moved, balanced on the balls of his feet like a man who was always ready for a fight. The rifle that hung above the door, cleaned and oiled and never more than a few steps away. This was a man who had lived through violence, a man who expected violence to find him again. And the nightmares continued. Sarah. James. The names repeated in his sleep like a dark prayer, always accompanied by apologies, always followed by sounds of grief so raw that Lily had to bite her lip to keep from crying. She wanted to ask him about it, wanted to know what had happened, who these people were, what had driven him to this mountain. But she held her tongue. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had pain they did not want to share. She of all people understood that. So she waited, and watched, and learned. And slowly, without either of them quite realizing it, something began to grow between them. It happened on the 16th night. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay in drifts as high as the cabin's windows, glittering in the moonlight like a sea of diamonds. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks, and through the small window, Lily could see more stars than she had ever seen in her life, a vast river of light flowing across the darkness. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Lily in the chair Ezra had built for her. Ezra on the floor with his back against the hearth, his latest carving taking shape in his hands. It was a horse this time. She could see its tiny legs, somehow graceful, despite being whittled from a rough chunk of pine. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. Ezra glanced up, surprised by the question. They had spoken very little in the evenings until now, each lost in their own thoughts. "My father," he said after a moment. "He taught me." We had a small homestead in Montana, and he would carve things in the evenings after the farm work was done. I used to sit and watch him for hours. He fell silent, but something in his voice, some loosening of the walls he kept so carefully maintained, encouraged Lily to push further. "What happened to him?" "Died when I was 14. Hunting accident." Ezra's hands continued their work, never pausing. After that there was nobody to teach me the fine work, so I taught myself what I could. "I am sorry," Lily said softly. "It was a long time ago." He shrugged, but she could see the old grief lurking beneath his surface calm. "Made my peace with it." For a few minutes the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the soft whisper of his knife against wood. Then Ezra spoke again. "What about you? You have family somewhere?" The question should not have stung, but it did. "I did once." Lily kept her voice carefully neutral. "My father died when I was 21. His textile mill burned down and the shock killed him within a month. After that I lived with my mother in Boston, just the two of us trying to survive." She swallowed hard. "I left her there. When I came out here, I left her, and I do not even know if she is all right." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Two people who had both lost too much sitting together in the firelight sharing their scars. "Why did you leave?" Ezra asked quietly. "What were you running from?" Lily hesitated. She had kept her secret this long, guarded it carefully, afraid of what might happen if she told the truth. But something about this night, about this man, made her want to be honest. "There was a man in Boston," she said slowly, "a moneylender named Theodore Blackwood. My family owed him money we could not pay. He began to visit our home more and more frequently. At first I thought he wanted the debt. Then I realized he wanted something else." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He wanted me, not as a wife, as a possession. He looked at me like I was something to be owned, something to be used. When I refused to marry his business partner, he made it clear that he would find other ways for me to repay what we owed." Ezra had gone very still. His hands had stopped moving the half-finished horse forgotten in his lap. "So you ran," he said. "I ran." Lily nodded. "I saw an advertisement for a mail-order bride in Colorado, and I thought it was my only chance. I thought if I could get far enough away, he would not be able to find me." She laughed bitterly. "And now here I am. The man I was supposed to marry is dead. I have no money, no prospects, no way to support myself. And Blackwood, I know him. He will not give up. He will send men to look for me. He will never stop until he finds me." The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, a lonely sound that seemed to echo the loneliness in Lily's heart. Then Ezra spoke, his voice different than she had ever heard it. Softer, more vulnerable. "I understand running," he said. "I understand it better than most." He set down his carving and stared into the flames, and when he began to speak it was like watching a dam break. The words poured out of him slowly at first, then faster, as if once started, he could not stop. "I grew up in Montana," he said. "My father was a homesteader. My mother was a teacher. They taught me how to live off the land, how to hunt and trap and survive in the wilderness. When I was 28, I met a woman named Sarah." His voice changed when he said her name. It became tender and broken all at once. She was the daughter of a shopkeeper in Butte. Golden hair, brown eyes, a smile that could light up a room. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her. We married within the year. Lily held her breath, knowing instinctively that whatever came next would be terrible. We had a son. Ezra continued, "James. Named after my father. He was 2 years old when it happened. 2 years old, just learning to walk, just learning to talk. He called me Papa. It was the best sound I had ever heard." He stopped, his hands clenching into fists, his jaw tight with the effort of controlling his emotions. There was a gang of outlaws working the territory that year, 4 men who robbed and killed without mercy. They had hit 3 homesteads in the area, and folks were scared. I should have been more careful, should have stayed closer to home. but I had traps to check and we needed the money from the furs. So I went up into the mountains just for 2 days. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. When I came back, they were dead. Sarah and James both. Sarah had tried to protect him, I could see that. She had died with our son in her arms. Lily felt tears streaming down her face, but she did not wipe them away. She did not move at all, afraid that any sound or motion might break the fragile spell that had allowed Ezra to share this story. I buried them behind the house, Ezra said. And then I went hunting. The word hunting, the way he said it, carried a weight that had nothing to do with animals. It took me 3 years to find them all. 3 years of tracking, of asking questions, of following trails that went cold and then picking them up again. I found the first one in Wyoming, the second in Arizona, the third in Texas. The last one had run all the way to Mexico, but I found him too. He looked up at her, and his eyes were terrible. Not angry, not vengeful, just empty, hollow, like a man who had burned out everything inside himself and was left with only ashes. I killed them all, he said simply. Every single one. And when it was done, I could not go back to the world. I had become something that Sarah would not have recognized. Something I did not recognize. So I came here, to this mountain, to be alone, to never fail anyone again. The silence that followed was absolute. The fire had burned down to embers, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the grief hanging in the air. Lily did not know what to say. What words could possibly be adequate for such a story? What comfort could she offer to a man who had lost everything and then lost himself in the pursuit of vengeance? But she knew what she could do. She rose from her chair and crossed the small space between them. Ezra watched her approach with something like fear in his eyes, as if he expected her to recoil from him now that she knew what he was. Instead, she knelt beside him and placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily. The first time she had initiated any physical contact. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, his muscles rigid with tension. "You are not a monster," she said firmly. "The monsters were the men who killed your family. You were a husband and a father who lost everything and tried to find justice." Justice, Ezra laughed bitterly. It was not justice. It was revenge, and it did not bring them back. It did not change anything. It just turned me into a killer. "You saved me," Lily said, "that night in the storm. You could have left me to die on your doorstep, but you did not. Monsters do not do that. Monsters do not give up their beds for strangers. Monsters do not spend their evenings carving wooden toys for children they will never meet." She reached up and touched his face, turning it toward her, so he had no choice but to meet her eyes. "I have known monsters," she said quietly. "Theodore Blackwood is a monster. The men who killed your family were monsters. You, Ezra Stone, are not a monster. You are a man who has suffered, who has done terrible things in response to terrible things done to him. But you are not evil. I have seen evil. I know what it looks like, and it does not look like you." For a long moment, Ezra just stared at her. Then something cracked in his expression, some wall that had been holding back a flood of emotion. His eyes glistened in the firelight, and he covered her hand with his own. "You should not trust me," he said, his voice rough. "But I do," Lily replied. "Maybe that makes me a fool, but I trust you." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows and moaning through the eaves. Inside, two broken people sat together in the dying firelight, each one seeing the other clearly for the first time, and neither of them knew it yet, but everything was about to change. The sound came 3 days later in the dark hour just before dawn. Hoofbeats, heavy and deliberate, muffled by the snow, but unmistakable, coming up the mountain trail toward the cabin. Ezra was on his feet before Lily even fully woke, moving with a speed and silence that reminded her just how dangerous this man could be. He grabbed the rifle from above the door and checked that it was loaded, his movements practiced and fluid. "Stay back," he said quietly. "Away from the windows. Do not make a sound." "Who is it?" Lily whispered, fear clutching at her heart. No one comes up here. No one. His voice was grim. Whoever it is, they are not looking for directions. The hoofbeats stopped. Lily could hear the crunch of boots on snow, then footsteps on the porch. A shadow passed across the window. 3 loud knocks on the door. "Who is there?" Ezra called his rifle, aimed at the center of the door. A pause. Then a voice smooth and cultured and utterly out of place in this wilderness. "My name is Victor Crane. I am looking for a young woman named Lily Bennett. I have information suggesting she may be in this area." Lily's blood turned to ice. She knew that name. Victor Crane was Theodore Blackwood's right hand, his enforcer, the man who handled problems that required a delicate touch and an iron fist. He was a hunter of people, a tracker of runaways, a man who had made a career out of finding those who did not want to be found. Blackwood had sent him. Somehow, impossibly, Blackwood had tracked her all the way across the country to this remote mountain, to this cabin in the middle of nowhere. "I do not know anyone by that name," Ezra said, his voice betraying nothing. "You have come to the wrong place." "Have I?" Crane's tone was polite, almost amused. "That is strange, because I have it on good authority that a young woman matching Miss Bennett's description was on the stagecoach that crashed near here 3 weeks ago. The driver's body was found, but there was no sign of the passenger. She survived Mr. Stone, and you are the only person living within 10 miles of that crash site." Silence. Lily could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears like a drum. "I found a woman in the storm," Ezra said finally. "She was half dead. I brought her inside, warmed her up, fed her. When the weather cleared, she went on her way. Headed for Silver Ridge, I believe." "Is that so?" Crane said. "And you did not think to report this to anyone?" "I do not report to anyone. Never have." Another pause. Lily could imagine Crane on the other side of that door weighing his options, calculating his next move. "Very well," he said at last. "I apologize for disturbing you, Mr. Stone. I will continue my search in Silver Ridge. But I should warn you, Mr. Blackwood is very determined to find Miss Bennett. He has invested considerable resources in this search. If you should happen to see her again, I would strongly encourage you to contact the authorities. There is a reward for information leading to her recovery." Recovery, as if she were a piece of lost property. "I will keep that in mind," Ezra said. "I hope you do," Crane replied. "Good day, Mr. Stone." The footsteps retreated across the porch. The hoofbeats resumed, growing fainter and fainter, until they disappeared into the morning silence. But neither Lily nor Ezra relaxed. They both knew this was not over. "He will be back," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He did not believe you." "No," Ezra agreed, lowering his rifle at last. "He did not." "I should leave." Lily's mind was racing. "If I stay here, I am putting you in danger. Blackwood will send more men. He will not stop until he finds me." Ezra turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her stop. "You are not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not alone. Not with men like Crane hunting you. You do not understand." Lily felt tears of frustration pricking her eyes. "Blackwood has money power connections. He will bring an army if he has to. You are just one man. I am one man who tracked and killed 4 of the most dangerous outlaws in the Montana Territory," Ezra replied. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something cold and hard. "I am one man who knows every trail, every cave, every hiding place on this mountain. I am one man who will die before I let anyone hurt you." The words hung in the air between them. Lily stared at him, her heart pounding for a reason that had nothing to do with fear. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Ezra was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the cabin in 3 long strides and stopped directly in front of her. He reached up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his massive hands. His palms were rough and warm against her cheeks. "Because you gave me a reason to live again?" he said, his voice rough with emotion. 8 years I have been up here just existing, going through the motions, waiting to die. Then you showed up on my doorstep, half frozen, half dead, and something changed. When I look at you, Lily Bennett, I feel something I thought I would never feel again." What she whispered. Hope. And then he kissed her. Lily had never been kissed before. She had imagined it, of course. What young woman had not? She had read about kisses in books, had listened to other girls whisper about them, had wondered what it would feel like to have a man's lips pressed against her own. None of her imaginings had prepared her for this. Ezra's kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, when instead she leaned into him and clutched the front of his shirt with both hands, something changed. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more desperate, as if he were a drowning man and she was air. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her closer, and she could feel the strength in him, the power that could have crushed her if he chose. But his touch was tender, almost reverent, as if she were something precious that might break if handled too roughly. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lily looked up into his storm-gray eyes and saw something there that made her knees weak. "Ezra," she breathed. "I should not have done that," he said, but he did not let go of her. "You deserve better than a broken old man who lives on a mountain and talks to wolves." "I do not want better," Lily said. "I want you." She kissed him again, and this time she was the one who initiated it. She had never been bold, had never been the kind of woman who took what she wanted. But something about this man, this moment, made her brave. When they separated again, Ezra rested his forehead against hers. "We have to be careful," he said quietly. "Crane will come back. Blackwood will send more men. This is not over." "I know," Lily said. "But we will face it together, whatever comes." Together, Ezra repeated, and for the first time since she had known him, he smiled. It transformed his face, made him almost handsome in a rough, weathered way, made him look younger, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Together he said again and sealed the promise with another kiss. The days that followed were unlike any Lily had ever experienced. She and Ezra did not hide their feelings anymore. They held hands by the fire at night. They kissed good morning and good night. They slept in the same bed, wrapped in each other's arms, though Ezra never pushed for more than she was ready to give. "You are worth waiting for," he told her one night when she apologized for her hesitation. "I would wait 100 years if I had to." She learned more about him during those 2 weeks than she had in all the time before. He told her about his childhood in Montana, about his parents, and his early years of wandering the frontier. He told her about Sarah, about how they had met and fallen in love and built a life together. He told her about James, about the way the boy had laughed when Ezra threw him up in the air, about his first steps and his first words and all the milestones that parents treasure. It hurt him to talk about them. She could see it in his face and the way his voice cracked at certain moments. But he did it anyway because she had asked, because he wanted her to know him fully. In return, she told him everything, about her father's death and her mother's desperation, about Blackwood and his hungry eyes, about the fear that had driven her across a continent seeking escape. He listened without judgment, and when she was finished, he held her close and promised that no one would ever hurt her again. One afternoon, he took her outside and taught her to shoot. "You need to know how to protect yourself," he said, placing a pistol in her hands. "I will not always be there. You need to be able to stand on your own." The gun felt heavy and foreign in her grip, but Ezra was patient. He showed her how to hold it, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger, rather than pulling it. He set up targets in the clearing behind the cabin and had her practice until her arms ached. She was not a natural, but she improved. By the end of the first day, she could hit a tin can at 20 feet more often than she missed. By the end of the week, she could hit it at 40. "Good," Ezra said, watching her reload with growing proficiency. "You are a quick learner." "I have a good teacher," she replied, and kissed him. On the 14th night, as they sat together by the fire, Ezra spoke. "When this is over," he said, his voice serious, "I want to ask you something." "Ask me now," Lily said. He shook his head. "Not now. When the danger has passed. When you are free. When you can answer without fear clouding your judgment. Then I will ask." But Lily knew what he wanted to ask, and she knew what her answer would be. "Whatever it is," she said softly, "The answer is yes." "You do not know that yet," he replied. "Yes, I do." He pulled her closer, and they sat together in comfortable silence watching the flames dance. Outside, the snow was beginning to melt, the first signs of spring creeping through the mountains. Everything felt possible. Everything felt hopeful. And then, because life rarely allowed happiness to go unchallenged, everything changed. They came at night. Lily woke to Ezra's hand over her mouth, his lips against her ear, whispering a single word: quiet. She had learned to trust him implicitly. She did not struggle, did not cry out. She lay perfectly still as he moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. How many, she breathed? 5, maybe 6. Coming up the trail. Crane, I do not know. But whoever they are not friendly. People do not approach a cabin at midnight with friendly intentions. He pressed the pistol into her hands, the one he had taught her to use. "Stay behind the bed," he said. "If anyone comes through that door who is not me, shoot them. Do not hesitate. Do not ask questions. Just shoot." "Ezra." "I know." He kissed her quickly, fiercely. "Stay alive. I will handle this." Then he was gone, slipping out the back door with his rifle, moving with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. Lily crouched behind the bed, her heart hammering, the pistol gripped in both hands. She could hear voices outside now, men's voices, rough and low. She could see shadows moving past the windows, blocking the moonlight. Stone. A voice she recognized. "Victor Crane. We know the girl is in there. Mr. Blackwood has lost patience with games. Hand her over and you can go back to your pathetic little life on this mountain. Refuse and we will burn this cabin to the ground with both of you inside." Silence. Then from somewhere in the darkness, Ezra's voice. "You are welcome to try." What happened next was chaos. A gunshot split the night, then another. Men were shouting, boots crunching in snow, more shots. Lily heard the distinctive crack of Ezra's rifle, heard a scream cut short. Through the window she saw muzzle flashes like deadly fireflies, illuminating brief snapshots of violence. One man down, then another. Ezra was fighting them in the darkness, using the terrain he knew intimately, the shadows he had lived among for 8 years. But there were too many. Lily heard boots on the porch, the back door. Someone was coming through the back door. She spun, raising the pistol just as Victor Crane stepped through the doorway. He was bleeding from a wound on his arm, his expensive coat torn, his face twisted with fury. But he was smiling when he saw her. "Hello, Miss Bennett," he said. "At last we meet. Stay back." Lily's voice shook, but her hands did not. "I will shoot you." "No," Crane said, taking a step closer. "You will not. You are a respectable young lady from Boston. You do not have the stomach for killing." He took another step, then another. Lily could see the confidence in his eyes, the certainty that she would crumble, that she would drop the gun and submit. He did not know her. He did not know what she had survived. He did not know what she was willing to do for the man she loved. She pulled the trigger. The shot took Crane in the shoulder, spinning him around, dropping him to his knees. He looked up at her with shock, and something that might have been respect. "You shot me," he said almost wonderingly. "I warned you," Lily replied. Then Ezra was there, bursting through the front door, blood on his face and his hands, his eyes wild until they found her. She saw the relief flood through him when he realized she was unharmed. The others, she asked, dead or running. He crossed to Crane and kicked the man's pistol away from his reaching hand. "This one will live, unfortunately. At least until the law can deal with him." "You are making a mistake," Crane gasped. "Blackwood will send more men. He will never stop." "Then I will kill them too," Ezra said calmly. "However many he sends, as many times as it takes." He dragged Crane outside into the cold and tied him to a post with rope from the barn. One of Crane's men was still alive, wounded, and Ezra tied him up as well. When he came back inside, he found Lily sitting on the bed, staring at the pistol in her hands. She was not crying, not shaking. She was very, very still. "I shot a man," she said. "You defended yourself," Ezra corrected. "You did what you had to do. I have never hurt anyone before." He knelt in front of her, taking the pistol gently from her hands and setting it aside. Then he cupped her face, making her look at him. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known," he said. "Tonight you did not freeze. You did not run. You stood your ground and fought. Sarah would have liked you. She was brave too." It was Lily realized the highest compliment he could give. She leaned into him, letting him hold her, and they sat together in the wreckage of their peaceful life, waiting for the dawn. The next morning brought clarity and dread in equal measure. Ezra rode down to Silver Ridge with Crane and the surviving raider, turning them over to the sheriff and explaining what had happened. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Tom Hartley, who had been lawman in these parts for 30 years, listened to the story without surprise. "Knew something like this was coming," he said. "Had a stranger in town a few days back asking questions about any newcomers. I did not tell him anything, but others might not have been so careful. This man Blackwood," Ezra said. "How do we stop him?" Hartley shook his head. "I have heard of Theodore Blackwood. Rich as sin, connected in all the wrong places. If he wants something, he usually gets it." "Not this time," Ezra replied. He returned to the cabin with supplies and news, neither of which was good. "Blackwood is already in Denver," he told Lily. "He arrived yesterday. Word is he is hiring men. A lot of men. He is done sending small parties. Next time it will be an army." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. "Then we have to run. We have to disappear. We can go further west or north or numb." Ezra's voice was firm. "We are done running. Both of us. We have been running our whole lives, and I am tired of it. It is time to end this. End this how we go to him. We face him on his terms, on his ground. We finish this once and for all." "That is suicide," Lily protested. "He has money men lawyers. We have nothing." Ezra looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not defeat, not resignation, determination. "We have something he does not expect," he said. "We have each other, and we have the truth about who he really is. The question is, are you willing to fight for your freedom? Or do you want to keep running forever?" Lily thought about it. Thought about the life she had been living, the constant fear, the looking over her shoulder. Thought about what it would mean to always be prey, to never know peace. Then she thought about Ezra, about the man who had saved her life and won her heart, about the future they could have together if only they were brave enough to seize it. "I am tired of being afraid," she said finally. "I am tired of letting him control my life. If we are going to do this, let us do it." Ezra nodded, and for the first time she saw a fierce joy in his eyes. "Then we leave tomorrow," he said. "For Denver, for Blackwood, for our future." He took her hand and she squeezed it tight. The hunt was about to become a reckoning, and whatever happened next, they would face it together. They left the cabin at dawn, riding double on Ezra's horse until they reached Silver Ridge, where they purchased a second mount and supplies for the journey ahead. The townspeople watched them go with curious eyes, whispering among themselves about the hermit of Greystone Mountain and the mysterious woman who had somehow drawn him down from his self-imposed exile. "Let them talk," Ezra said when Lily mentioned the stairs. "By the time we come back, they will have something better to gossip about." "If we come back," Lily replied. "We will come back." His voice held no doubt. "This is our home now. I am not giving it up." The ride to Denver would take nearly 3 days, cutting through mountain passes that were just beginning to clear of winter snow. It was hard travel, cold and exhausting, but Lily found she did not mind. After months of being trapped in the cabin, first by her injury and then by the weather, the open sky above her felt like freedom. They talked as they rode, filling the hours with conversation in a way they had never quite managed before. There was something about the journey, about moving toward danger rather than fleeing from it, that loosened their tongues. "Tell me more about Sarah," Lily said on the first night as they sat beside a small fire in a sheltered hollow. "Not the sad parts, the happy parts." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Then he began to speak. She used to sing while she did the housework. Could not carry a tune to save her life, but she did not care. She said music made the work go faster. His lips curved in a distant smile. And she was stubborn. Lord, was she stubborn. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. We had arguments that lasted for days because neither of us would back down. Who usually won? She did. He laughed softly. She always did. I would bluster and storm around, and she would just wait me out, calm as you please, until I came around to her way of thinking. She sounds wonderful, Lily said. She was. Ezra's voice was tender with memory. She would have liked you. You have that same stubborn streak. Is that a compliment? It is the highest compliment I know how to give. They fell silent, watching the stars wheel overhead. After a while, Lily spoke again. Do you think she would have wanted you to be happy again? Ezra did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was thick. She told me once before James was born that if anything ever happened to her, she wanted me to find someone else. I got angry, told her nothing was going to happen, that we would grow old together, that I did not want to hear such talk. He swallowed hard. She just smiled and said she hoped I was right, but if she was wrong, she did not want me to spend the rest of my life alone. She said I had too much love in me to waste it on grief. Lily reached over and took his hand. She sounds very wise. She was. Wiser than me, that is certain. I did not listen to her. Spent 8 years proving her wrong, hiding up on that mountain, refusing to let anyone in. He squeezed her fingers. Until you showed up on my doorstep and refused to leave. I did not refuse to leave. Lily protested. I was unconscious. Same thing Ezra said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They rode on. On the second night, camped in a small grove of aspens, with Denver only half a day's ride ahead. Lily made a decision. They had set up their camp in the usual way, Ezra building the fire while Lily prepared their simple meal of dried meat and biscuits. The night was cold but clear, the stars brilliant overhead, and there was a strange sense of peace despite the danger that awaited them. After they had eaten, Lily sat close to Ezra by the fire, leaning against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. Tomorrow, she said quietly. We do not know what will happen tomorrow. No, Ezra agreed. We do not. She turned to look up at him, at this man who had become her whole world in such a short time. I do not want to wait anymore, she said. Wait for what? For anything. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his scar with her fingertips. I have spent my whole life waiting. Waiting for things to get better. Waiting for my father to recover. Waiting for my mother to stop crying. Waiting for Blackwood to forget about me. Waiting to feel safe. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I am done waiting. I want to live. Really live. Starting tonight. Ezra went very still. Lily, he said carefully, you do not have to. We have time. After tomorrow, we will have all the time in the world. No, Lily said firmly. We do not know that. We do not know what tomorrow will bring. All we know is that we have tonight, and I do not want to spend tonight being careful. I want to spend it being yours. She kissed him before he could argue further, kissed him with all the passion she had been holding back, all the desire she had barely understood until she met him. Are you sure? He asked when they finally broke apart, his voice rough. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Ezra looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for doubt or fear. He found neither. What he found instead was love, pure and fierce and unafraid. Then I will make it good for you, he said softly. I promise. What followed was something Lily would remember for the rest of her life. Ezra was true to his word. He was gentle and patient, attentive to every sound she made and every movement of her body. He asked permission before each new touch, waited for her nod or whisper of assent before proceeding. He made her feel cherished and desired and safe all at once. And when the moment came when they finally joined together completely, Lily understood at last what all the whispered conversations and blushing hints had been about. This was not the cold duty her mother had described, not something to be endured. This was connection. This was joy. This was two souls becoming one. Afterward, wrapped in blankets beside the dying fire, Lily rested her head on Ezra's chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heart. I did not know, she murmured. I did not know it could be like that. It can be like that every time, Ezra replied, his hand stroking her hair. Better even. We are just getting started. Promise, I promise. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you feel like this. Lily smiled against his skin. Then we had better survive tomorrow. We will, Ezra said, because now we have something worth living for. They slept in each other's arms, and for one night at least, the darkness held no terrors. The city emerged from the plains like a mirage, its buildings rising against the backdrop of the mountains. Denver, in the spring of 1888, was a boomtown, rough and raw and full of possibility. The streets were crowded with people of every description, miners and merchants, cowboys and bankers, women in fine silks, and women in working calico. Lily had grown up in Boston, had thought herself familiar with cities, but Boston was old and established, its streets laid out with colonial precision. Denver was something else entirely. It was chaos and ambition made manifest, a city that was building itself in real time. Ezra moved through the crowds with a wariness that spoke of long habit. He kept Lily close to his side, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. "Where is Blackwood's office?" Lily asked. "Center of town. 3-story building, brick and stone. He built it to impress people, to show them how much money he has." Ezra's lip curled with contempt. "Men like him always need to show off. How do you know so much about him?" "I have been listening, asking questions. There are people in Silver Ridge who have had dealings with Blackwood or who know people who have. He is not popular, but he is feared. And fear makes people talk if you know how to listen." They found a modest hotel on the edge of the business district and secured a room. Then, while Lily rested and gathered her thoughts, Ezra went out to do what he called reconnaissance. He returned 2 hours later with a grim expression. "He is here," Ezra reported. "Blackwood. He arrived 3 days ago and has been hiring men ever since. He has at least a dozen working for him now, maybe more. They have been asking questions all over town about a young woman from Boston. He is not even trying to hide it," Lily said. "He does not think he needs to. In his mind, you are property that was stolen from him. He is just retrieving what is his." He sat down beside her on the narrow bed. "There is something else. What I found out more about him, about his history, the things he has done." Ezra's eyes were hard. "He has done this before, Lily. You are not the first woman he has hunted. There have been others, women who owed him money, women whose families owed him money. Some of them agreed to his terms, some of them did not. The ones who did not, they disappeared. No one knows where they went." Lily felt cold, despite the warmth of the room. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that Theodore Blackwood is not just a moneylender. He is a monster, and the world would be better off without him." "We cannot just kill him," Lily said. "That would make us murderers. They would hang us." "I know." Ezra's jaw was tight. "That is why we are going to do this the right way. We are going to expose him, make him face justice. And to do that, we are going to need evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that Blackwood thinks no one will ever find. The kind that has been buried and hidden and forgotten." Ezra leaned forward. "I have been talking to people. There is a woman here in Denver, a former servant of Blackwood's, who was dismissed when she learned too much. She has documents, letters, ledgers, records of payments to men who make problems disappear. She has been too afraid to come forward, but if we can convince her to testify, if we can get those documents to the right people, Blackwood will not be able to buy his way out." "How do we find her?" "I already have." Ezra allowed himself a small smile. "We meet her tomorrow morning before we confront Blackwood. And then we end this." Her name was Martha Greer, and she lived in a small boarding house on the outskirts of Denver. She was a thin, nervous woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. When Ezra and Lily arrived at her door, she almost did not let them in. It was only when Lily explained who she was, what Blackwood had done to her family, what he was still trying to do, that Martha's expression changed. "Another one," Martha murmured, stepping back to let them enter. Lord, help us, another one. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but clean. Martha gestured them toward a pair of worn chairs while she perched on the edge of her bed. I worked for him for 15 years, she said without preamble. Started as a kitchen maid, worked my way up to housekeeper. I kept my head down, did my job, did not ask questions. That was how you survived in that house. What changed? Lily asked. I found the ledger. Martha's hands twisted in her lap. He had a private study that no one was allowed to enter. One day he forgot to lock it. I went in to clean, not knowing, and I found it on his desk. A book full of names and dates and payments. Payments to men for jobs done. And next to each payment, a note about what the job was. What kind of jobs? Martha looked at Lily with eyes full of old horror. Making people disappear. Accidents arranged. Fires started. Women delivered to certain addresses and never seen again. It was all there in his own handwriting. A record of every evil thing he had ever done. Ezra leaned forward. Do you still have this ledger? Number? He noticed it had been moved, knew someone had seen it. He questioned all the staff, had us searched. I thought I was dead for certain. But then one of the footmen confessed to curiosity, and Blackwood had him dealt with. Martha swallowed hard. I was dismissed without reference. He told me that if I ever spoke a word of what I had seen, I would end up like that footman. Then how can you help us? Lily asked. I may not have the ledger, but I am not stupid. Martha's chin lifted with a trace of defiance. While I was still in that house, I wrote down everything I could remember. Names, dates, amounts. I wrote letters to myself and mailed them to a friend in Chicago for safekeeping. I made copies of documents when I could and hid them in my belongings. I knew someday someone would come looking for the truth. I have been waiting 15 years for someone brave enough to use it. She rose and went to a trunk in the corner of the room. From a false bottom she withdrew a thick envelope yellowed with age but intact. This is everything I have, she said, handing it to Ezra. Enough to put Theodore Blackwood away for the rest of his miserable life. If you can get it to someone who cannot be bribed, the sheriff, Lily said. Sheriff Hartley in Silver Ridge. He is an honest man. There is a federal marshal in Denver, too, Ezra added. Name of Cooper. I have heard he is clean. If we can get this to both of them, make it public enough that it cannot be buried, Blackwood will have nowhere to hide. Martha nodded slowly. Then do it. Do it for all the women he has hurt. Do it for the people who have disappeared. She looked at Lily with fierce intensity. And make sure he knows why. Make sure he knows his sins have found him out at last. We will, Lily promised. I swear it. Theodore Blackwood's office occupied the entire third floor of the finest building in Denver's business district. The lobby was all marble and polished wood designed to intimidate visitors and remind them of the power that resided above. Lily felt that power pressing down on her as she and Ezra climbed the stairs. Her heart was pounding, her palms were damp, and every instinct was screaming at her to run. But she kept climbing. She had not come this far to turn back now. 2 guards stood at the top of the stairs, rough-looking men with pistols on their hips. They started to block the way, but Ezra simply looked at them, and something in his eyes made them step aside. The outer office held a secretary, a nervous young man who stammered that Mr. Blackwood was not seeing visitors. Ezra ignored him and pushed open the inner door. Theodore Blackwood sat behind a massive desk of dark oak papers spread before him, a cigar smoldering in a crystal ashtray at his elbow. He was exactly as Lily remembered him, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with cold eyes that calculated everything and everyone in terms of their usefulness to him. When he saw Lily, those cold eyes lit up with something that made her skin crawl. "Miss Bennet," he said, rising from his chair with false courtesy. "At last. I have been looking for you." "I know," Lily replied. "Your men made quite an impression." Blackwood's gaze shifted to Ezra, assessing him with the practiced eye of a man who was used to evaluating threats. "And you must be the mountain man who has been causing so much trouble. I expected someone more impressive." Ezra said nothing. He simply stood there, solid as stone, his presence a promise of violence held in check. "Let us be direct. Blackwood continued, returning his attention to Lily. "You owe me a considerable sum of money. Your family signed contracts, made promises, incurred obligations. I am simply here to collect what is mine." "I do not owe you anything," Lily said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Whatever contracts my mother signed were obtained through coercion and fraud. They would not hold up in any honest court." Blackwood laughed, a cold sound that held no warmth. "An honest court? My dear girl, there is no such thing. Courts belong to those who can afford them, and I can afford a great deal." He stepped around the desk, moving closer. Ezra tensed, but Lily held up a hand to stop him. "Not yet. I did not come here to argue about money," she said. "I came here to make you an offer." "An offer?" Blackwood's eyebrows rose with mocking curiosity. "How delightful! What could you possibly have to offer me?" "Your freedom," Lily replied. She reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope Martha Greer had given them. She saw Blackwood's eyes flicker to it, saw something shift in his expression. Not fear, not yet, but wariness. "I know about the ledger," she said, "the one you keep in your private study. The record of every person you have had silenced, every woman you have made disappear, every crime you have committed in the name of collecting debts." Blackwood's face went very still. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do." Lily opened the envelope and pulled out a handful of papers. "And so does Martha Greer." At the mention of that name, Blackwood's mask finally cracked. For just a moment, Lily saw the monster beneath the civilized surface, the predator that had haunted her nightmares for months. "That woman is a liar," he hissed. "A disgruntled former employee with a grudge." "Then you will not mind if we share her lies with the federal marshal," Lily said, "or the newspapers, or anyone else who might be interested in the truth about Theodore Blackwood." Blackwood stared at her, and Lily saw him calculating, weighing his options. Then his hand moved toward the drawer of his desk. Ezra moved faster. In a blur of motion, he crossed the room and had Blackwood by the throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against the wall. The cigar fell from the ashtray, scattering ash across the polished desk. The drawer, Ezra said calmly. "There is a gun in there. I saw you reaching for it. You cannot do this." Blackwood gasped, his face reddening. "I have men. Guards. They will come. Let them." Ezra's grip did not loosen. "I have killed men before, Mr. Blackwood. Dangerous men. Men who thought they were untouchable. You are nothing compared to them." The door burst open. 4 of Blackwood's hired guns rushed in, weapons drawn. They froze when they saw the tableau before them, their employer pinned to the wall, the mountain man's hand around his throat, the young woman standing calmly with an envelope full of damning evidence. Before anyone could move, another figure appeared in the doorway. A man with a silver star pinned to his chest and a pair of deputies at his back. "Federal Marshal Cooper," the man announced. "Nobody move." What followed happened very quickly and yet seemed to take forever. Ezra released Blackwood, stepping back with his hands raised. The marshal's deputies moved through the room, disarming Blackwood's men with brisk efficiency. And Lily, her hands trembling only slightly, handed the envelope to Marshal Cooper. "This is evidence," she said, "of multiple murders, kidnappings, and conspiracies committed by Theodore Blackwood over the past 20 years. I am prepared to testify to his crimes against my family, and there are others who will testify as well." Blackwood was struggling against the deputy, who held him, his face purple with rage. "This is outrageous," he spat. "I am a respected businessman. I have friends in high places. I will have you all destroyed." "Your friends cannot help you now," Marshal Cooper said grimly. "We have been building a case against you for years, Mr. Blackwood. We just needed someone brave enough to come forward." He nodded to Lily. "Thank you, miss. You have done this country a service." As the deputies led Blackwood away, he turned his head to look at Lily one last time. His eyes were full of hatred, but beneath the hatred was something else. Fear. "This is not over," he snarled. "I will get out of this. I will find you." Ezra stepped forward, putting himself between Blackwood and Lily. "If you ever get out," he said quietly, "I will know, and I will find you first. Just like I found the men who killed my family. 4 of them. Took me 3 years, but I found every last one." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Blackwood could hear. "And when I find you, you will beg for death before I give it to you." Something in Ezra's eyes, some glimpse of the darkness that lived inside him, made Theodore Blackwood go pale. For the first time in his life he understood that he had met someone he could not buy, could not frighten, could not control. The deputies dragged him out, and Lily and Ezra were left standing in the ruins of his empire. "It is over," Lily whispered. Ezra pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "No," he said, "it is just beginning." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Silver Ridge. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the grand society wedding Lily had once imagined she might have. The church was plain built of rough timber and determination. The pews held only a handful of guests. Sheriff Hartley and his wife, Martha Greer, who had traveled from Denver to witness the downfall of her former employer, a few townspeople who had come to know Lily during her months on the mountain. But to Lily, it was perfect. She wore a dress of white cotton that she had sewn herself, simple and elegant, with tiny blue flowers embroidered at the collar. Ezra wore a suit that he had not touched in years, slightly too tight across his massive shoulders, but clean and pressed. He had trimmed his beard and tied his hair back, and when Lily walked up the aisle toward him, she saw his eyes glisten with unshed tears. The minister, an elderly man with a kind face and a gentle voice, spoke the words that had joined countless couples before them. But when it came time for the vows, he paused and looked at Ezra. "I understand you have written your own words," he said. Ezra nodded. He took Lily's hands in his own, those massive hands that could kill and create with equal skill, and he looked into her eyes. "I have lived 48 years on this earth," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "and for 8 of those years I was dead, not in body, but in spirit. I had given up on hope, on love, on the possibility of happiness. I came to this mountain to die slowly, one day at a time, until there was nothing left." He paused, swallowing hard. "Then you showed up at my door, half frozen, barely alive, and you changed everything. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me someone to protect, someone to care for, someone to love. You gave me back my life." A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. "So I make you this promise, Lily Bennett. From this day forward I will love you with everything I have and everything I am. I will protect you from every storm that comes our way. I will stand beside you in darkness, and in light, in joy, and in sorrow, in sickness, and in health. And when my last breath comes, your name will be on my lips, and your face will be in my heart." The church was silent. Martha Greer was openly weeping. Even the stern Sheriff Hartley had to wipe his eyes. Lily took a shaky breath and spoke her own vows. "When I got on that stagecoach in Boston, I thought my life was over. I was running from a monster toward a future I did not choose, with nothing but fear in my heart. I expected to find safety in Colorado. I expected to find survival. I never expected to find you." She squeezed his hands. "You are the bravest man I have ever known. Not because you are not afraid, but because you feel fear and act anyway. Not because you have never been broken, but because you have been shattered into a million pieces and still found the strength to put yourself back together. You taught me what it means to be strong. You taught me what it means to be loved." Her voice trembled, but did not break. "So I make you this promise, Ezra Stone. I will love you for who you are, not who you were or who you might become. I will stand beside you on the mountain and in the valley. I will be your partner, your companion, your friend, and I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how much you are cherished." The minister smiled and spoke the final words. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ezra pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and fierce all at once, and the small congregation erupted in applause. When they separated, Lily looked up at her husband, this mountain man who had saved her life and won her heart, and she smiled. "I love you, Ezra Stone, and I love you, Lily Stone." He said her new name like a prayer, now and forever. Spring came to the Rocky Mountains like a blessing, melting the snow and coaxing new life from the sleeping earth. Wildflowers bloomed across the meadows, painting the landscape in shades of purple and yellow and white. Lily stood on the porch of the cabin looking out at the view that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. So much had changed in the year since she had stumbled out of a blizzard and into Ezra's life. The cabin had been expanded, a new room added for the child that would soon arrive. The land around them had been cleared and fenced, transformed from wilderness into the beginnings of a real homestead. And Theodore Blackwood was dead. The news had reached them just last week, brought by a letter from Marshal Cooper. Blackwood had died in prison waiting for his trial, struck down by the same weak heart that had killed Harold Pritchard. Some called it justice. Others called it the hand of God. Lily simply called it relief. "It is really over now," she said when Ezra came to stand beside her. "He can never hurt anyone again." "No," Ezra agreed, his arm settling around her waist, his hand resting on the swell of her belly. "He cannot." They stood in silence, watching the sun climb higher over the mountains. The air smelled of pine and new grass and possibilities. "Do you ever think about what might have happened?" Lily asked. "If the storm had not brought me to your door." "Sometimes." Ezra's voice was thoughtful. "I think I would have spent the rest of my days on this mountain alone, slowly fading away until there was nothing left. You saved my life as much as I saved yours." Lily leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I think about Sarah sometimes," she said quietly. "And James. I hope wherever they are, they know you are happy again. I hope they can see that their husband and father did not give up, that he found a way to live again." Ezra was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "I talk to them sometimes, in my head. I tell them about you, about the baby, about the life we are building. I like to think they hear me. I like to think they approve." "I am sure they do," Lily said. "Sarah wanted you to find happiness, remember? She told you that herself." "She did," Ezra agreed. "And it took me 8 years, but I finally listened." The baby kicked a strong movement that made Lily gasp and laugh. Ezra felt it too, his eyes widening with wonder. "That never gets old," he said. "No," Lily agreed. "It does not." They stood together on the porch, feeling their child move between them, looking out at the future that stretched before them like an unwritten story. "What shall we name her?" Lily asked. They both knew somehow that the baby was a girl. Call it instinct or intuition, or simply hope. Ezra considered for a moment. "Hope," he said finally. "I want to name her Hope." Lily smiled, her eyes filling with happy tears. "Hope Stone." She tested the name on her tongue. "It is perfect." And it was. The sun was setting over the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. Lily Stone, her hair now more silver than brown, sat in the rocking chair that Ezra had built for her so many years ago. She was surrounded by the sounds of her life, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard, the voices of her grown children catching up after months apart, the distant lowing of cattle, and the whisper of wind through the pines. 25 years. A quarter of a century since she had arrived in Colorado as a frightened runaway seeking only survival. Now she was the matriarch of a sprawling family, the owner of a prosperous ranch, a woman respected throughout the territory for her wisdom and her kindness. But more than any of that, she was loved. Ezra emerged from the house and lowered himself into the chair beside her with a grunt. His hair was entirely white now, his movements slower than they once were. But his eyes were the same, that deep storm gray that had captivated her from the first moment she saw them. And when he looked at her, she still felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. The same question he had asked her 1,000 times over the years, and she gave him the same answer she always did. "You," she said. "I am thinking about you." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, the way they had on their first night together, the way they did every night still. "I was thinking about the storm," he said, "the one that brought you to me." "The best storm of our lives," Lily replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren chase each other across the grass. Hope, the oldest, now a mother herself, was supervising with the patient humor of a woman who knew that skinned knees were part of childhood. James and Rose and William and Grace were scattered around the property, their spouses and children filling the homestead with noise and life. "We built something," Ezra said quietly. "Something real. Something that will last." "We did," Lily agreed. "From nothing. From two broken people who found each other in a blizzard." She turned to look at him, at this man who had been her husband for a quarter of a century, who had given her children and grandchildren, and a love so deep it felt infinite. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" she asked. Ezra's lips curved in a smile. "I remember everything about that night. You said you had never had a woman like me. You said you would show me how it was supposed to be. And did I?" There was a glint of mischief in his eyes that belied his years. Lily laughed, a sound that still made his heart skip after all this time. "Every day," she said. "Every single day." Ezra raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture of tenderness that had become their private ritual. "I love you, Lily Stone," he said. "Today, tomorrow, and forever. And I love you, Ezra Stone. More than I ever knew was possible." Around them their family continued to laugh and play and live. The sun sank lower, setting the clouds on fire with color. The mountains stood eternal and unchanging, the same mountains that had witnessed their first meeting, their first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their children. The land remembered them, and they remembered the land. "There is something I want to tell you," Lily said after a while. "Something I have been thinking about for a long time." "What is that?" Lily looked out at her family, at the life they had built, at the legacy they would leave behind. "When I was a young woman, frightened and alone, I thought my story was over. I thought there was nothing left for me but survival day to day until the end. I had no hope, no faith, no belief that anything good could ever happen to me again." She turned to face her husband. "But I was wrong. So wonderfully, beautifully wrong. Because sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually the best thing. Sometimes the storm that nearly destroys you is the same storm that carries you to where you belong. Sometimes you have to lose everything before you can find what truly matters." She squeezed his hand. "You are what truly matters, Ezra. You and our children and this life we have made together. If I could go back and tell that frightened girl on the stagecoach what was waiting for her, she would not believe me. She could not believe that such happiness existed." Ezra leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I would tell her to trust the storm," he said, "because that is what I would tell myself. Trust the storm, because it will bring you home." Lily rested her head on his shoulder, content in a way that went beyond words. The grandchildren came running up to the porch demanding stories and hugs and attention. Hope followed with patient affection, her own belly round with the newest addition to the Stone family. The noise and chaos of a large family surrounded them, warm and chaotic and perfect. "This is happiness," Lily thought. "This is what I was searching for all those years ago without even knowing it. Not safety, not survival, but this love, this family, this life." And it was more beautiful than any story she could have imagined. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of her husband beside her, listening to the sounds of her family breathing in the scent of pine and wildflowers and home. The storm had brought her here, and she would be grateful for that storm until her last breath. Because sometimes the best things in life do not come from sunshine and calm seas. Sometimes they come from the heart of the tempest, from the moment when all seems lost, from the desperate knock on a stranger's door in the middle of a blizzard. Sometimes they come from a mountain man with storm-gray eyes and hands that could kill or create with equal skill. Sometimes they come from love found in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, they last forever. The sun set over the mountains, and the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over Lily and Ezra from the very beginning. The same stars that would watch over their children and their children's children for generations to come. And somewhere in the quiet of the evening, Lily could almost hear Sarah's voice whispering across the years. "You did well," the voice seemed to say. "You brought him back to life. Thank you." Lily smiled and held her husband's hand a little tighter. "Thank you for letting me," she whispered back. And the stars continued to shine eternal and unchanged over the mountains and the homestead and the family that had been built from nothing but hope and love and the courage to survive the storm.